and I had gone to...
My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Ellen Eggers. We're doing an interview with Mary Koehler, a gracious lady who has been, along with her late husband Carl, a more than generous benefactor to the Linn County Historical Society, St. Luke's Hospital, Meckwith Manor, and the Cancer Society. Mary, tell us when and where you were born.
I was born in the Washington County Hospital on May the 19th, 1920.
And what was your parents' names?
My father was John Edward Westfall. He owned and operated a jewelry store in Washington. And my mother was Catherine Eunice Westfall. She was a full-time homemaker.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had two brothers who were considerably older than I, one that was 9 years older and one that was 10.
What was your brothers' names?
The youngest was Victor Leroy, and the oldest was John Edward.
And you said your dad worked in a jewelry store.
He owned it and operated it. Yes.
Did he have an auto early on when your memory started?
Did he what?
Did he have an automobile?
Oh boy, I'm sure. Yes, I'm sure he did. But what it was like, I can't recall. I wasn't, up into cars at that time.
This photograph Alan is showing is the nurse is holding you in the hospital. And you come quite late in.
I did. I tell people I think I was an afterthought. And as I understand it, my mother used to say that the nurse told her I was born with a veil over my face. And back in those days, that meant good luck or good fortune.
And the next picture of you is your dad standing in front of your home.
Yeah, that's right. And I have those wonderful bloomers on.
And in the next photograph, you look like you're about 10 years old, standing in front of your house. Very nice. Where'd you go to school, Mary?
Well, I went to school. Oh boy, I've got a whole. Can we stop a minute? I'm not sure about what. There was 7th and 8th grade that was broken out at that time, and then you went to high school. So 9, 10, and whatever was high school. I guess I just have kind of forgotten, to tell you the truth.
Did you walk to school when you was in grade school?
Yes, I did, and our home was at the time about, I would say 8 or 9 blocks from the school, and I had to go back past a grocery store to get there. And on the way home, those were the days when grocers had charge accounts, and so I went in and bought candy every day for friends. I was very popular because they all wanted to walk home with Mary. And we went in and they picked out what they wanted, and my mother didn't know what was happening until finally the proprietor thought, well, she must not know this. And by that time we had a $16 bill, which back in those days was quite a bit for candy.
Your early memories in grade school. You were talking about they had a unique fire escape system.
Well, I don't know whether it was unique. It was I think fairly traditional for the tube. It was a big tube on the outside of the building.
A silo-like tube on the outside of the building.
Well, it wasn't as big as a silo, but it was round, and it was attached at the top and at the bottom. Mr. Guzman, the janitor, we used to call him janitors, would be at the bottom, and he would catch us as we came down. Now we put a lot of responsibility on him because it would have been, you really went lickety split down that tube.
How did they? Wouldn't that have been quite traumatic for a young child the first time they tried that?
You better believe it. Yes, we all dreaded that. Yes, we did.
Did your mother sew your dresses?
Yes, she did. And of course, you have only to look at when I was born to realize that I was about 9 when the Depression really hit Kapow. And I do think that my father's watch repair business is what kept us afloat, because people could not afford to buy new things, so they wanted them repaired. But
Did Mary, as a little girl, have a lot of dolls?
oh yes, yes, I did. I had a lot of dolls. I was very much into that.
Being that your brothers were so much older than you probably had to entertain yourself a lot.
I did.
Around home.
There was almost no interaction between me, because in those days it seemed like even 5 years created a great gap in terms of how close or distant you felt to someone. So
you really probably never really got to know your brothers.
not very well.
Yeah.
Not very well.
You were telling me about fairy tales.
Oh yes, and there I have that book in here someplace.
No, that's all
That
right.
was
Just
part of
tell
the.
us.
Well, I somehow latched onto this idea, but I had a bedroom in one of the homes we rented, and there was a window close by, and the moon came in, and I read this story about the moonbeam fairy that came down the moonbeam and onto the bed. And the bed at the time had a quilt on it that had quilt blocks. And the fairy would play hopscotch on the bed. So I have just never grown up enough to give up my fairies, and I have a collection of them out here.
Do you remember Sundays? I imagine that was a special day. Your dad didn't have to work.
That's right.
Did he ever take you for Sunday drives?
Oh, yes. And if he didn't remember to, believe me, I would remind him. And almost as soon as we hit the road, I was sound asleep. It used to provoke him, so anyway.
Did you ever go out in the spring of the year and
In the what?
spring of the year and hunt morel mushrooms?
Oh,
Your dad?
I didn't go with my dad. He did go, what we used to find bittersweet on the fence rows. And it never occurred to us that that might belong to somebody. We just stopped the car and helped ourselves.
Bittersweet was bright orange berries that you could use to decorate around the house with.
Mm-hmm.
Did he teach you how to hunt morel mushrooms?
No, he didn't. You know, most people that hunt those are pretty close to the vest on where they are and how you do them. But he would gather them, and Mother would soak them overnight in salt water and then rinse them well in the morning and dip them in egg and cracker crumbs. Oh, they were good.
Did you have any fond memories of Christmas?
Well, as Christmases go, they were all very pleasant. Since my father had a store, he stayed open Christmas Eve till 10 o'clock because some people came in to pick up their gifts late. And so we really had our Christmas when he got home on Christmas Eve. And
what was your favorite Christmas? Can you remember ever getting anything special at any Christmas time?
well, when I was, I guess, about 17 or 18, my parents decided that they would give me a cameo ring for Christmas. And it was to be customized and so forth. And it didn't come, and they were kind of desperate because that was all they were planned to give me. But it finally came by special delivery the Christmas morning, and I think that was probably very special. It had my maiden name was Westfall, so it had a W in the mounting on both sides, and I still have it and cherish it.
Who do you suppose you'll pass it on to someday?
Well, I don't know. You know, I had a very close girlfriend in high school that often said, "Now, Mary, when you get to the point where you don't want that anymore, you remember me." But my goodness, we've almost lost track of one another now, and I don't know how it'll turn out.
When you was a little girl, did your dad ever take you to a circus? Did a circus ever
Yes,
come to town?
yes, we did. We lived in the southern part of Washington, and about 3 blocks away there was an open field where carnivals and circuses would come. And of course, in those days it was customary to have a parade. And the parade came down South Iowa, which was about a half a block or a fourth of a block from our home. So we used to go and watch that. and I was at once absolutely terrified and absolutely fascinated, because, you know, for these big lumbering old elephants and tigers that were throwing themselves against the cage like they wanted to get out. So,
Was your dad into community service in the communities?
he, about the extent of that would be, he was a volunteer fireman, and I think he was assistant chief for a number of years. But
Do you ever have any, excuse me, big fires in your community?
we had a very big fire that engulfed the Masonic quarters for Masonic. It wasn't a temple, it was a top floor of a business building. And I don't know what started it, but it was a mean fire, and they just had to let it burn itself out. There was no way they could safely fight it.
Do you remember Halloweens? Did your folks let you go trick-or-treating?
Well, yes, they did. And it wasn't, though, until I was a little older. But I know once or twice I had some unpleasant experiences. Some older boys thought it would be really funny to slap garbage in my face, which they did. Well, and of course I began to cry and tore for home. And we had a neighbor. I had a jack-o'-lantern with a candle in it, and I went up to the window and held it, thinking that, oh my, that's going to really scare the wits out of them. And the man that lived there had gone out the back door and come around behind, and he went, oh, believe me, I took off like like I was shot from a gun.
I imagine every Halloween that comes back to mind.
Oh yes, that does indeed.
So where did you go to high school then, Mary?
Washington High School.
Washington?
Mm-hmm.
And what year did you graduate in it?
Well, 1938.
Did you have any, how big was the class?
116 people.
Was you interested in sports or in music? Or?
Not in sports, but I played the violin, and I was in a string quartet, and I played in the orchestra. And there were a number of plays that put on that I had a part in. But
did you ever continue your interest in music through your life?
not really.
You did. You had no desire.
Well, not to make a career of it or anything, or even, I guess, I was not a very good violin player to begin with, and not enough to make me want more, you know.
You didn't entertain your friends at social events by your
Oh,
talent.
not if I could help it. No. My mother belonged to some organizations that once in a while, in desperation, they would ask a student to come and play for them. And no, I wasn't into that very much.
Did your folks let you go to school dances? And
Yes, but it was pretty conservative. I mean, of course, in Washington, you can't get, back then you couldn't get into a whole lot of trouble. But,
unless you went looking for it.
well, that's right, and even then.
Did they allow you to date in high school?
Yes, yeah, they did, but they were very careful that I chose wisely, I think.
How did you do in school? Was you, did you like school?
Oh, very much, very much. And I think that record indicates I was salutatorian, which is next to the highest. There's a valedictorian and salutatorian. So I did okay.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Made your folks very proud.
Mm-hmm.
And then had you planned, or had your folks planned on you going to college after high school?
Well, yes, and college for me was Washington Junior College, which was really just one flight of stairs up from the high school. It was in the same building. So you didn't feel like you'd gone off to college. It just came to you, sort of, you know.
When you think back, wasn't that that had made it quite comfortable? It's quite a traumatic for a senior to go on to college, where you just went up another flight of stairs.
Yeah, I did, but you know, on the other hand, it would have seemed more special, I think, if I had gone away. But that's all right. That was, and then of course I didn't do anything further with college until I was 45 years old.
Yeah.
So
Was you? What was your ambition? Did you have any ambitions at that age?
At that age, no.
Yeah.
Just to get married, I guess.
You had mentioned acting, that you had...
Yes. You know, in a small community, they have to press everybody into the act because they just don't have a whole lot of talent to choose from. And I ended up as a character actress. I was a maiden lady, and I had to knit. And I didn't know how to knit, but I had to make it look like I knew. And I must have convinced somebody because I got first prize for character acting in that. So at that time I thought, oh, well, you know, maybe this is what I'm cut out to do. But that idea didn't last long.
Did you meet your future husband in college?
Mm-hmm. I did. He had enrolled at Caltech and was back for the summer to, school wasn't in session, I guess. And I don't know how it happened, but I had some kind of a class assignment to interview him. And oh my, I thought, you know, he was the cat's meow because he'd really been around. He'd been in the Navy before he enrolled at Caltech. So.
Did you meet him when he was home on leave?
Yes, I did. He was born and raised in Ainsworth, which is about 9 miles east of Washington. And I never had known him because we were going to different school districts when we were younger. So.
Was he older than you were at the time?
Just 5 years.
5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Your folks didn't frown on you marrying a farm boy 5 years older
Well,
than you?
He didn't have his sights set on being a farm boy. His parents, he was the oldest of 5 boys. And I'm sure that as the firstborn, they would have loved it if he had shown an interest. But whenever he was out, of course, those are the days when you plowed with horses, you know. And he had the 2 horses hitched up. And if a plane went over, everything stopped because he was watching the plane. And as a young boy, he would, there was I think whether it was Popular Mechanics or through some of the magazines, you could order parts to an airplane that you could put together, little models, you know. So he was fascinated with flight from early times.
And Lindbergh was probably quite still popular.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when did you get married?
I got married June the 7th, 1942.
Mm-hmm. And then what was he doing at that time when was he still in the service or did he go on to become
Yes, he had just finished his flight training at Pensacola, I believe it was, and he came home to be married, and we married and spent one night in Washington and then took off for California and stayed put. That was it.
Did he become a commercial airline pilot?
Mm-hmm, but not at that time. He spent, well, I guess 4 years or so in the naval service as a Navy pilot. He was stationed with the test division and on Terminal Island, which was just offshore from Long Beach.
Was it at this time that the Japanese were being put in camps out there in California?
Yes, yes it was. And Carl, everyone thought the Japanese were going to invade. So Carl thought I ought to have protection. So he got a gun. And he tried to teach me. We went out to a firing range someplace, and he tried to teach me to use it. And I just went all to pieces. I didn't want anything to do with that. And then, of course, we later found out that I was pregnant at the time, which made me a little more emotionally volatile than might otherwise be the case.
So when was your first child born?
David was born July the 16th of 1943. He was just 60. Is that compute right? He was just 60. Does it? You're not. Okay.
Yes.
That's fine. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Had you ever thought about coming back to Iowa, Mary, at that time?
Yes, we did. Carl was by that time out of the service, and we figured we needed to go back to our roots, more or less. That was the idea. And so we moved back, and for a time lived with my brother Vic, who was an optometrist in Benton. And Carl secured a Western Auto, what do you call it?
Western Outer Hardware Store?
Yeah, franchise or whatever. And but soon found out that he was just not cut out. He was more of a loner, and it just didn't work. So he had the store about a year, and during that time I was pregnant again, and we had a winter that was very difficult in terms of flu. There was a lot of flu going around, and I had been very ill. And to make a long story short, I lost the baby at 6.5 months. So it was after I was in Vinton that the birth was terminated. So
What hospital were you at?
Virginia Gay. And it was in a different location at that time than it is now.
Had your husband, did he still have his interest in flying all of?
Oh yes, oh yes. He never.
Did that ever bother you? The man's going to kill himself, and I'm going to be all by myself.
Well, I guess not. You know,
when you're younger like that, you don't.
Well, I don't know that you don't worry about it, but I knew that he was very good mechanically. He understood the mechanics of planes, and of course, his role during the war was to test the aircraft, and they just flew everything, a little bit of everything. And they would just hand him a manual and let him read about how to push the buttons and pull the levers and send him off to test the thing. Well, the mortality rate really was quite high in that unit. But I think I felt a little more comfortable because Carl understood a lot about mechanics. And if he got in a tight spot, I reasoned at least that he could work himself out of it better than someone that had just no feel for that at all.
Mm-hmm. So then you went back to California after Linn?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then at that time, did he start going into?
Well, for a time, it was just kind of catch as catch can. But then there was a non-sked that was starting up in Long Beach, so he contacted them and went to work with them for a while. But I've forgotten what the name of the airline was, but the it really was non-sked. They didn't go until they had a full load. So if you wanted to get someplace and you were patient, that was okay. But the pilots loaded the baggage, and they did everything except as well as fly the plane. And it wasn't long before he was tired of that. So
when they would book a full load, they would call up your husband and want to know if you'd fly.
Well, yeah, and the passengers had to be notified too that, well, we're going to go now, so get your stuff together. And it was just a little bit too ragtag for Carl, I guess. But then right after that, it turned out American Airlines began to advertise for pilots. So then he went to some of their flight training schools, and they particularly liked Navy pilots because they'd had good training to begin with. So they could take them at a higher point and bring them along faster than they could some. So,
did he, when he became a full-fledged captain, could he pick and choose his flights, or did that come later when he had seniority?
The flights were awarded on the basis of seniority, no matter what your rank. And you didn't become a captain because you were good-looking or whatnot. It was seniority, strictly seniority. And, of course, you had to pass the health test every 6 months. And if you were flying different equipment, you had to, of course, learn the new equipment. So there were schools to go to and so forth. But the long and short of it was that he got on with American then. Mm-hmm.
Carl spent his career with American Airlines,
yes,
right?
Yes, he did. Mm-hmm.
And did he ever fly international flights, or was it strictly domestic?
Domestic. He flew a lot from Los Angeles to New York, but here again, they would bid their trips every month, and depending on their seniority, they would be awarded trips. So some fellows wanted, in fact, what usually happened and what happened with Carl too is he became interested in income property. And it was an ideal, the airlining was an ideal career for anyone that wanted a supplement of any of interest or money or whatever. And so that's how he had time. You see, he was gone maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and then he was home several days. So almost all the pilots had something going on the side.
How many years did he spend with the airlines?
25.
25 years, and he made the rank of...
Captain.
Did he ever have the opportunity to fly 747s? Or any of the really
No, I
large
don't think he
planes?
did. I think he was 707 was his favorite, if I'm not mistaken.
These photographs, Mary, of the plane and of your husband, you mentioned the fact that you took these photos yourself.
Yes, I did, as a matter of fact. I was a student at Cal State Fullerton at that time, and I was taking a class in photojournalism, and we had to do a layout of sorts, so we didn't care. It was up to us to choose what the subject matter would be, and so I thought, well, this would be something that most students wouldn't have access to, and so I went out to the airport with him one time and took a series of these photos.
And they published this...
Well, these were compared, I suppose, across the class or classes, and the faculty every year would name someone as the outstanding student, either a major or whatnot. And I think largely on the basis of that layout, I was named as outstanding photojournalism.
And when did Carl finally retire? What year did he retire from the service?
1970, I think, if I'm not mistaken. He was retired several years before I retired.
Was he, was it mandatory?
Yes, at 60, when he was 60, so we could figure it out. I'm not just exactly sure when he started with American, but it was at that time and still is, as far as I know. Retirement at age 60 is mandatory.
Did he ever have an accident?
Not that I'm aware of. Nope, he never did.
25 years of flying without an accident.
Yeah, and he never was hijacked, or he did have, once in a while, you'd have somebody come on board who thought it was funny to tell the flight attendant that he had a bomb. Well, Carl disabused him of the fact that was not funny, and they generally had FBI or somebody waiting at the destination for them. So, but he didn't. He was never, as far as I knew, at least. Now they did have, when I was going through this material, I did come across some, called accident reports, even though they didn't result in an accident, but near misses. And there was a description of a plane that was approaching, and they couldn't figure out who it was or what it was. And they each, of course, were taking evasive action. And I think they came fairly close. They were fortunately at different altitudes, but they were right. They could see the passengers in the other plane. So they were, of course, required to write up any incident like that.
Did he ever come home and tell you he thought he saw a flying porn object or FBO?
Well, not really. I think he wasn't ready to be too definite about that. I think there were pilots that, in fact, did feel like they had seen something.
So, Mary, what did you decide as your boy was getting older? Did you want to go back to school or do something with your life? What happened in your life? Well,
I think in my work in Washington, I had the occasion many times to talk to school secretaries. They would ask me to come out and address them or one thing or another. And I think there was sometimes a feeling that they didn't know that they were appreciated. Their work was appreciated quite as much as it should be. And I guess I tried to explain to them that, well, if you really want to leave the echelon of secretary or whatnot, then you really need to get additional education. And so I think I said it often enough that I took my own advice.
Did you move then to Washington, D.C.?
Lived in Washington for 2 years.
What year did you?
63 to 65.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl lived in California. I lived in Washington. Carl flew in and out of Washington. You see, he would bid trips in there, so that it wasn't a whole lot different than when I lived at home in Whittier. And
what was your duties? What was your job description?
well, basically, I was to go in and set up a national office for this group, and to serve as a communications center and to provide service to local chapters of in these various school districts. And that's what I did.
This was the NEA?
Mm-hmm. The National Education Association is the mother unit, and our association was an affiliate. So we were not, strictly speaking, the NEA, but we came under the umbrella of the NEA. And we had many of the advantages and services offered to people in the NEA.
You were quite involved in this, weren't you, Mary?
Yes, very much.
The blue brochure there, or the pamphlet, the National Education Secretary. Was this a quarterly magazine or something?
It was, as I recall, it was what would be twice a year, whatever, biannual or whatever.
Did you partake in?
I did the design and production work on it in the national office, and edited the copy and so forth. So it was basically a national office production.
That lovely photograph of you there, that was in this time period.
Yes, I guess that was taken in conjunction with one of the workshops I did.
And the gentlemen that are standing around you, they would have been who?
Superintendents of schools, and they were serving on a panel of some kind, that if the audience being school secretaries. And so they had asked me to come down. It seems to me it was in Atlanta, to come from Washington to moderate that, which I did.
And the bottom photo down there, all the ladies gathered around you and your desk?
Yes, those are women who work in school offices.
Across the country?
Well, probably they didn't come from long distances, no doubt from the greater Washington area, because of the expense of transportation. So, but eventually, of course, I did go out to various conventions and so forth and talk. And
I imagine you did a lot of public speaking.
I did. Mm-hmm.
And your topics would probably be education.
Yes, sometimes I would do workshops on how to create a newsletter, what you put in the newsletter, how the format is, and things of that sort. It would be whatever they wanted me to speak on.
Mm-hmm. You were what? You were 43 years old at this time.
Mm-hmm.
You had done quite well for yourself. Ellen, did you get the clipping in the center of the thing?
Yes.
On the scene, on the national office scene. Did you experience any events in Washington while you was in there?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Yes, I did. The National Education Association, in that big building that we see here, had a conference room in the basement. And I was there at the time that the Surgeon General, and I think his name at that time was Terry, last name was Terry, made the first announcement that tobacco was harmful to health. That was the first time publicly that I believe that had ever been voiced. Then also I was there at the time of the Martin Luther King March on Washington, and the newspapers urged people to stay indoors because they were not sure whether there would be violence. And I watched this great body of people going right under my window because I stayed home, and they were very peaceful. And it was also the time that President Kennedy was assassinated. So it was a very eventful period. And
Did the office workers get off to go to the funeral?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know that we got off for that. We did get off for there was a procession, of course, with his body was taken with one horse and reversed boot or something. But I remember we were standing along, my secretary and I were standing along the side of the street, right, just happened to be standing next to a man who had a radio he was listening to. And I heard him say, "Oh my God." And what he was reacting to was the fact that Jack Ruby had just shot Leah Harvey Oswald. That was his name, I think. Mm-hmm. And it was almost too much to take in at one time.
I can imagine there probably wasn't too much work accomplished that weekend.
No, indeed there wasn't. And I searched unsuccessfully so far. I had saved a copy of the issue of the Washington Post. I subscribed to the Washington Post, and it was almost cover to cover about the assassination. And I thought, well, I would like to save that and keep that. So I wrapped it in some kind of, not cellophane, but some kind of wrap, and
tissue.
And put it where it was dark. Well, I don't know whether it survived, but it was on newsprint, so of course newsprint deteriorates, and I knew that.
Mary, what time in Washington, D.C. did you determine it was time to move on to something else, or did your job terminate? Or
no, I went to Washington with the understanding it was a short-term assignment, that I would go back to organize and start the national office, but that I had every intention from the beginning of returning shortly to Whittier. So that's that. I really thought it was just going to be 1 year, and then there was still enough to do that I felt obligated to stay another year, which I did.
So then you went back to California.
Mm-hmm.
Had you, what year?
65.
65.
Mm-hmm.
And did you already have your mind made up what you wanted to do when you went back to California?
Yeah, I did.
When did you decide that you wanted to go back to college?
Well, I think it came about as a product of talking with a lot of women that kind of wanted something more than they had as far as secretarial work was concerned. And I thought what I was telling them made sense for me too, and that if I wanted to become more than a secretary, I couldn't do it with the education I had. So I decided, and writing was, I seemed to have a flair for writing, and I enjoyed it, and so that's how I got into it.
Was your college in Whittier, or?
No, it was in Orange County, near Fullerton.
Did we mention the name of the college?
California State University, Fullerton.
Had this been a fairly new college at this time?
Well, yes, it was. It started in 1959, according to the history that I wrote, and I came on the scene in 63, so I was there almost from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And did you get a degree?
Mm-hmm. I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was going to be your field of work?
Journalism. Mm-hmm.
At this time, Mary, was there student unrest on colleges' campuses in California?
Yes, there was.
And mid-60s?
Ronald Reagan was governor of California at the time, and he paid a visit to the campus, which was disrupted by unhappy students. And he was unhappy that they were unhappy. And then after he left, in due course, some of the students barricaded themselves in the Performing Arts Center, and I don't know, it was kind of it wasn't nearly as bad as on many campuses, but it was a problem.
Before we get too far into your college career, we want to pick up on that photo down there.
This
on the
one?
bottom of the board, yes.
Yeah.
What was that, Mary? Was
Well,
that before you went back to college?
yes, it was 1960. See, because the conference that she is giving me this citation for, I attended at the White House in Washington in 1960.
Mhm.
So it was before I even went to Washington for the secretaries group.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So what did you do then after you graduated?
I
Did
taught.
you stay with the college?
Oh yes, oh yes. I stayed with the college. I taught in the classroom for 3 years,
Mhm.
and then I went to the president's office for 9 years.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And you were on the administration.
Hmm. That's right.
Also, you designed a school quarterly, did you?
Hmm. Hmm.
The Continuum.
Continuum.
Is that,
Uh-huh.
that it?
That's right. Hmm.
You were responsible for that?
Hmm.
Who is this attractive-looking lady on the cover of this issue of 1971?
That is Janine Altmeyer, and she was a native of La Habra, which is very close to Whittier. She had a beautiful singing voice, and she was headed for the Metropolitan Opera. And I'm not sure what happened to her after she left the immediate area, but she had a beautiful.
The photo just to the right then is,
Yes.
is of you and her. With
Yes, uh-huh,
Mhm.
right.
Very nice.
Hmm. She was very, very talented.
So you started becoming very active with Cal State.
Oh,
You were
yeah,
a student there.
that's right.
You were a teacher.
Teacher.
You're on
Hmm.
the faculty.
That's right.
Well, Carl must have been kind of proud of you.
Well, I guess he probably
Did he
was.
know what was going on?
Oh, yes, yeah. No, I think he was.
Yeah. And also, you were a mentor.
Hmm. To the President's Scholars, and let's see where they are.
In the center.
That's the very first group of them,
Mhm.
and that's the President Shields standing in the middle.
Now, who are these scholars?
They are they have to meet some high standards to be considered for scholars, but they apply to go to school there, and if they meet the test, they are interviewed by a group of people from the university, and if they meet the standards, then they are given stipends and one thing and another to help them with school and given special treatment as far as that's concerned. And I was with the group when it started, and we were feeling our way along as to what kind of things they should do, and now there are several hundred of them. And but usually they came in groups of about 10 at a time.
Is that you standing on the right in the miniskirt?
Yes, of course. Just couldn't resist, could you?
The photograph up there with you holding, what is that in your hand?
That's a mace, and it's what the person heading the commencement procession carries as a symbol of authority.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And your responsibilities were?
To coordinate. We had 7 exercises on the campus on one weekend. So that meant that logistically it was kind of ticklish because we had room for so many cars, and of course we had families coming, naturally. And there were just picky things, like the carillon had to be turned off so that when they were playing the processional, we weren't going to get the ding-dongs or the whatever. And a lot of things. So we started planning about 6 months ahead of commencement in order to get finished. But
And then up on the top with the gentleman presenting you with a...
That's the chairperson of the President's Scholars.
Mhm.
In other words, I was retiring at the time, and he was giving me a token of their appreciation.
And then the photo on the far right over there at the podium?
Yes, that was the 3rd president I served under, Jewel Plummer Cobb, and she was commending me for my service, and I have a plaque here, something about exemplary service, whatever. Nothing would do, but it's exemplary. But anyway, and also she's over here.
The lower one there?
Yes, it's the same person.
And then the one down below there, you're adjusting the...
Yes, that is President Shields, who actually hired me in the first place. And I like that picture because here's this great big guy struggling with his hood, and this little bitty thing back here trying to help him. But anyway, I think it's fun.
Did you have the title of assistant professor?
No, I didn't. I was his executive assistant. I was executive assistant to the president, and I was an assistant professor because I didn't have a doctorate and didn't intend to get a doctorate. So, anyway.
You had spent a lot of years at Cal State.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, looking back now, did you see any change in the students from the time you started until their social cultures?
Well, I don't know. I started off being quite a bit older than everybody else, and that in itself made me kind of a special case because that was before mature students were really going back to school. So, in a sense, I think that was a little different. But
did the students look up to you because you were older?
Well, I wouldn't say that they looked up to me, but I was very grateful that they were hospitable to me. I wasn't sure how they
treated
did.
You with respect?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And jokingly, they often, maybe I shouldn't say this on camera, called me a DAR, which is a damned average raiser.
I imagine Carl was very proud of what his wife was.
Yes, he was. He was very proud of that.
Mary, why was it necessary to have a commencement coordinator?
Well, essentially because there were 7 of these exercises scheduled on one weekend, and logistically, to get all the graduates onto campus and their families and get them in and out without a lot of confusion was no small problem. So that's at least those kinds of exercises made it possible for the students to cross this platform and get their diploma personally, whereas if you'd had one massive thing, that would have been impossible. Mm-hmm. So that's basically.
Yeah. Mary, the plaque down there, the Honor Society, what was this?
Well, that is given for scholastic ability, and when I was in college and whatnot, they look at your grades. You can apply for membership. If you meet the stringent standards, then you may become a member. So then I went from being just a member to being on the board. I was regent for the society for about 5 years, I guess it was. And my job as regent was to work with campuses that wanted to start a chapter of Phi Kappa Phi.
Mm-hmm. And then, when it come time to celebrate their, Mary, when it come time to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Cal State, you were asked, or did you choose to write a book?
I was commissioned to write the history because the history professor, Dr. DeGraff, was going to do a very scholarly and much, much better version than I did. But he got so enmeshed in the minutia that he just he may still be working on it. And I don't say that really in any mean, because he was just so careful. But he was kind enough to loan me a lot of his basic research notes. And then I spent a lot of time at the library, because this isn't something that you write off the top of your head. It took a lot of study on my part to get the strands. And I would go to the library and do the research and make some copies of things that I wanted dates and so forth on. And then, of course, I was living in Whittier, which was about 25, 30 minutes away from the campus. Go home and start the writing after I'd culled.
And they felt, according to the newspaper clipping up there, that if anybody was capable of doing it, it was you, because you'd been there.
Well, yes, that's a little stretch, I think, because, like I say, you don't write a history just, oh yeah, I remember that. You remember that?
Took a lot of research.
Took a lot
in-depth research.
Really did.
Yeah. And The two photographs up at the top up there, Mary, these were
Those were
past presidents, or
no. The man on the right,
On the right.
this on the right is Donald Shields, the same man that's talking to me on that farthest one over there. He was the president that of this university at the time. He asked me to become his executive assistant, and he remained president for 10 years, and then went to Southern Methodist as president. He was followed after he left by a stand-in president, Miles McCarthy, to the far left, I guess it would be. And during that time, they were advertising for a president, and Jewel Plummer Cobb, the woman in the middle, came out as the successful candidate.
What year did you finally retire, Mary?
1983.
Did all of these years, did you, of course you were an Iowa girl, born and raised in Iowa, did you enjoy California?
Yes, I did. I missed the seasons in the beginning, but I
Where
did.
you lived, was it a fast pace of life, or was it...
No, Whittier was pretty much a little Quaker town. It was Whittier College and Nixon, everyone connects them because they were from that area.
Did you ever experience any earthquakes?
Yes, did. The one in '87 is what propelled us to do something. We were both long retired, and we had talked about moving because there were too many people, too much traffic, too much of everything. And when we were young and moved there, when Carl was in the service, it was an exciting place to be. But as we got older, the pace got wilder, and we just couldn't find that attractive. So,
with all of Carl's years at American Airlines, was he given a family pass that he could fly his family around? Did you take advantage of it?
No, because I was working, and so I couldn't get away when when the two of us. We did take one trip to Boston one weekend and together when he was on the crew, flight crew, and we walked the Freedom Trail and had a wonderful weekend.
What did Carl do after he retired? Did he have any hobbies?
Well, he sort of self-taught him. He was a self-taught computer person. He really did not like to keyboard things, but he was fascinated by the mechanics of it. So he just liked to get into it. And actually, when I was writing the history, 2 chapters that I'd spent quite many days on bombed. I lost them. I thought I lost them, and I was sick because I was under a very tight deadline for this thing. And so golly, he said, don't give up, honey. I'll keep working on it. And he did, and he got it back. So I was
able to retrieve it.
Yeah, and I was very grateful for that, I'll tell you.
What was your first exposure to the computer world?
Oh gosh, I can't remember it. When
college?
Well, I don't remember, to tell you the truth.
Did you have it available to you when you wrote the book Kaleidoscope?
Oh yes, I did that at home.
Okay.
Yeah, and transmitted it by wire or whatever to the campus where they picked it up and used it from there.
Were you, like the rest of us senior citizens, kind of intimidated by the computer when...
Very, yeah. Still don't feel terribly comfortable with it, but love it as a word processor because it's very handy.
And then, did you eventually move back to Cedar Rapids? Well, yeah, you did.
Yeah, I did in 1947 when I was pregnant with this baby that we lost.
No, after you retired, when did you come back to Cedar Rapids then?
Okay, we came back here in '88, and that was just after the earthquake.
And why did you decide to come back?
Well, we knew that we wanted to leave California. That had been in our mind for a long time. And so that earthquake just helped to catapult us into some action because we'd been waffling on it for quite a while. So...
did you find the difference in property value quite an advantage for you?
Very much so. Very, very much so. And without being specific, Carl was interested in trading property. And he found that if you could trade property instead of buying and selling, you could avoid capital gains tax. And he loved to dig into things, so he read up and read and got squared away on all the nuances of trading property. And so we did very, very well because the property in California was so much higher in price than about here, so made quite a difference.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to your 50th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
You took quite an adventurous.
Yes, and the interesting thing about it is we didn't do it when the anniversary actually came along. We fooled around. It was about a year or so after the 50th before we really got around to it. But we told our son and his wife that if they would make all the arrangements for a trip on the Concorde, that we'd take them with us. So we did. They did, and we did, and we had a great time. And they stayed on then. We stayed only about 4 days in London, and then came back by British Airways.
It flew from New York to
New York to London. Mm-hmm. And of course, we had the benefit of this wonderful lounge. Oh, that is to die for. All this, and it's exclusively for Concorde travelers. And our son told the flight attendant, as it happened, it was my birthday too, May the 19th, and I guess it was about 1993. But anyway, he told the flight attendant that my husband his dad was a pilot and so forth, and that was our anniversary thing and so forth. So make a long story short, the captain invited us up to the cockpit, which strictly is not exactly kosher. But anyway, they kind of stretch things a bit. And so we had a real nice chat. And oh my, the treatment. And of course, we laughed about it because we said, we don't believe that we fool anybody. This does not look to us like we're just do this 2 or 3 times a week, you know. There are people that do just commute practically on the Concorde because it's, 4 hours, something like that, to London. It doesn't amount to anything.
Did you try to act like seasons?
That's right, we did, and I don't think we fooled anybody. You know, we really did not.
Because you kept looking around.
Well, yes, and trying not to look like you're looking, you know.
Of course, the Concorde breaks the sound barrier.
Yes.
Did you hear that one?
No, sir. You know, we were a little disappointed in that. We thought, and interestingly enough, in the cabin part of that plane, there is, whether it's an altimeter or a speedometer or what, but in most airplanes you don't know how fast you're going or what the altitude is. But because this is kind of a special sort of airplane and people want to fly faster than the speed of sound, they do have this information, and it keeps changing as the situation changes. But we thought there would be maybe a kind of a jerk or something. Not a thing. Very uneventful.
Your wine glasses didn't even quiver?
No. Yeah, we had, of course, they fed us this wonderful meal, and we had a flower. Each of us had a flower on our tray, and I tell you, it was fun.
In your lifetime, Mary, did you ever fly a small plane or fly in a small plane?
Nope, and that's just half of it. I never yearned for that. Carl started early, but he bought an airplane that had been wrecked someplace or another, and he went about repairing it, and he kept wanting me to fly with him, and I said, I'm sorry, I gotta have the big boys because I don't much care for that. So
you waited for the big one.
I waited for the big ones, and they might not be any safer, but I felt like they were.
Did you ever ride in a balloon?
Yes, I did. Carl, we decided after we went faster than the speed of sound, he wanted to go slower than the speed of sound. One thing leads to another. So,
Mary, you and your husband Carl become very involved with St. Luke's Hospital, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And tell us some of the functions you performed, some of the duties that you had at St. Luke's.
Okay. A Catalyst, I edited, designed, and pasted up. Now that's archaic. Today we don't do that. We use computers for all of that. But at the time I was doing this, I didn't know how to use the computer for that. So I did for 5 years. I did, I think it was 3 or 4 issues of this a year. And I only had, always as a volunteer, of course, and I only had about 3 weeks off between issues. And finally, after 5 years of that, I decided it was getting too much like a full-time job because I couldn't leave it alone. It had to be just so.
And you found yourself doing it at home probably?
Oh, yeah, that's where I did the work. I had my computer and all my equipment at home. The paste up and the light table and the whole schmear was at home. So, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I love writing, and I've met some interesting people. And
what about the one above, the legacy?
This?
Mm-hmm.
What about it?
Yeah, what was your, did you edit that?
Yes, I wrote the 2 of the 4 articles that were in there, and that was for planned giving. And the idea is the foundation administrators would tell me which people to interview because they were donors. They were cultivating them as donors. And then I had them call ahead and explain who I am, so they don't get this call from a little old lady that they don't know. And then I go out and interview, tape record it because I like the accuracy of that, and then transcribe and start the writing. And after I get the article where I want it, then I send it to the person that's being interviewed to let them read it, because sometimes when we talk, there's a nuance about the voice, the expression, or the body language or something that makes copy sound altogether different than if you just read it. And so I always had them check it for tone and accuracy and things of that sort. And so they were comfortable with it because they knew what it was going to say before it came out.
Yeah. And then the St. Luke's created the Carl and Mary Koehler Legacy Society.
Mm-hmm. They did that on the basis we had done a lot of, given up quite a bit of money to various things. And so it was on the basis of that. And then they had, Carl was on the foundation. He was on the investment committee of the foundation for a while, and of course I was doing this work, and so we made quite a bit of contribution to them. Mm-hmm.
Did Carl serve on the board of directors?
He was, yes, he was for a while, and he was. They put their different people on different committees, and his strength was investing, so they put him on the investment committee.
And then you were very active. When did Carl pass away? He
passed away in September of '96, and he hadn't been very well. Actually, the dedication of Koehler Drive, he was feeling okay for that, but just about 2 weeks after that, he began to feel not so good. And by the time we went to the doctor and had X-rays, it was way too late. And the doctor said he did not feel it was any reason to put him through the discomfort of the last-ditch measures when it wasn't going to help. So we understood that, and I had long since, years ago, I had written an article on hospice for these very newsletters. And so we both understood what it was, and we both were impressed with the philosophy because basically it empowers the patient to call the shots as long as possible. And that, it turns out, is one of the hardest things for people to do in the hospital, because every few minutes somebody is coming in to take your temperature, take you to the bathroom, bring something to eat, or do something. At home, you can have as much quiet as you want, or as much activity as you want. And so based on that, on our experience, personal experience with that, then I started hosting some coffees because we had this big apartment. And so I could do it because I would invite half of the people in Greenwood Terrace for the morning and the other half in the afternoon. And then we'd have, they have a quilt that they were raffling off. So we didn't make all that much, but the point was to educate people about what hospice involved, because it is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Did Carl smoke?
He smoked when I knew him first, but he quit, and he just quit cold, and I think it was because he didn't like it in the cockpit. The cockpit's very confined, and the smoke just didn't. But he had not smoked for 40 or so years. So I don't know. He had melanoma, which is a skin cancer, and the thing is, when they X-rayed him, they found it had metastasized to the liver and lung. So that's very bad stuff if it gets to that point.
Do you ever think about maybe that could have been caused by him being a pilot up there behind that windshield?
Well, I don't know. There was at one time some thought that just the altitude, the strain, the fact that your sleeping is disrupted because you don't go to bed at the normal time. It depends on the flight you have to report for.
Yeah.
But
then after he passed away, you become very active in the Cancer Society, did you?
Mm-hmm. I did.
And what did you do?
Well, actually, I became what was known as a stakeholder. The Cancer Society a couple of years ago decided that because cancer touches millions of people every year, that it would be good to have some lay people in there with the scientists who are trying to get money for research. And you didn't have to have any medical background, but you did have to have contact with one way or the other, either as a survivor yourself or loss of loved ones. Of course, I lost a husband, I lost a brother, I lost a brother-in-law, and I lost a daughter-in-law to cancer. So there was strong motivation there. Also, if you'd been a caregiver for someone, so there were a number of things. And they brought us in someplace. I have a picture of the first group of us stakeholders. And our job was to read these applications that we got twice a year. They would fly us into Atlanta for discussions. And we would recommend then, based on the discussion, understand that the committee was composed of about 25 to 30 very, very skilled scientists, and they were divided into certain fields and specialties. So, of course, without any medical background, I was there, I guess, as a symbol of the people that had either succumbed or had it and survived.
Very closely attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
What is the photo on the board of you holding the bouquet? Was that a special
This?
occasion? Mm-hmm.
Well, probably yes. Probably for can't think of the name of the group at the moment.
That's okay.
Maybe I'll think of it sooner or later.
And then you become very involved with Meckwith
Mm-hmm.
Retirement Center,
Mm-hmm.
and these pictures on the board there. Of course, the one is of Carl just before he passed away, evidently.
Mm-hmm. Yes. See, this was just before. And
They named a street out by the drive, Koehler Drive.
They named it Koehler Drive.
Excuse me, Koehler Drive.
Mm-hmm. They did. And this, of course, is our son, who was standing by the...
Mm-hmm. And who's the young boy standing beside you?
Right here,
Uh-huh.
that's a grandson. That's an adopted child. That's David's adopted child, one of them.
Mary, have you ever slowed down long enough to look back?
That's why I'm doing it.
Realize all the things you accomplished in your life were Is that kind of what we're involved in right now?
I think that's what we're doing.
Would you like Alan to swing the camera around the room?
Oh, my, no. Oh,
him
my,
more of your
no.
memories?
No. That's a memory that would be a nightmare, I guess, if he'd do that.
You can be very, very proud of what you and your husband accomplished in your lifetime.
Well, thank you. I think when I look back, I'm very gratified. I really am. I think how fortunate I've been to be able to do a lot of these things. A lot of people do it as much or far more, but in a different way. And so, you know, it's been a wonderful ride.
Where's your son living, and what's he doing today?
He works for Allstate, and he lives in Barrington, Illinois. And I'll be visiting them Labor Day weekend.
Mary, who is this in the older photograph up there?
Okay, my two brothers, my brother Vic to the left, and my brother John to the right, my mother and me. My father was apparently gone by that time, dead of a heart attack.
Then over to the right, is a wedding?
Yes, that is a wedding. I guess she would be a step-grandchild of mine. David married a woman who had been married before, and she had a child. So I don't know whether technically I'm a step-grandmother, but she was being married, and so I was there for that wedding.
And the next one?
And the next one down is little Emma Grace, and she is my first great-grandchild. Oh. And she is David's wife is holding the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's Grandma.
There's Grandma, yeah. You can see how. Oh, of course, it was difficult for me to hold the baby because of my back, so I couldn't do much lifting.
And the little boy and the
little boy and the little girl. That's little Emma on the left, and little Owen Michael on the right. And down here, on either end, are David's biological daughters, and then his present wife. And at the bottom, another wedding of the young lady who's being married is an adopted child. So there were two adopted and two biological children in that family.
How many grandchildren?
There are 4 grandchildren, 3 girls and a boy.
Great-grandchildren?
2.
2?
Mm-hmm.
Mary, unless you have any more memories you want to record or tell us about, even though you haven't spent a lot of years in Cedar Rapids, the Cedar Rapids History Center, the Linn County Historical Society, would like to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us, and I'm sure your family will appreciate this someday.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.